And here comes Todd Frazier and the Pirates. Todd, thanks for getting mic'd up today.
Thank you, man. Good to hear you. Hey, guys.
I'm Joe. That's John. And you're over at first base today. Anytime you want us to shut our yaps, if you're batting or you want to chat with somebody over there, hopefully there'll be nobody at first base today. But...
Exactly. No, we'll be talking. I like to talk, so it calms me down a little bit, so it'll be good. Down.
Todd with the RBI double to bring in Hayes. Now let's get Evans to bring you around. I want to hear what it sounds like to score from second.
Sounds like a cow in heat or something. I'm going to be in trouble, man. You're going to hear me huffing and puffing.
Let us check in with the voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Joe Block. And I'm excited about this in particular because, Joe, the first couple of folks I've checked in with are friends who are involved in soccer. And when we talk about remote broadcasting, it's very much part of soccer since the restart of sports, but that's probably the smallest learning curve. I feel like most sports that I've called where your main job is following the ball itself, that's the easiest adjustment. My experience was the first time I did baseball remotely, that is the toughest sport because if you don't have all the angles, you need to know what the base runners are doing. You need to know what the alignment is defensively. It's not just a matter of where the ball is. But, Joe, I appreciate you taking some time out from what I understand is a pretty busy offseason.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a newborn, so we just keep making people. So it stays busy in our household. It's good though. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be on. This is great. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
So let me ask you your origin story early on. We all have kind of some similar pursuits, but when was the first time you put a headset on, other than recording off of TV? What was your first game that you showed up to at any level, high school or at Michigan State, to call a game?
Well, the first time I put a headset on, I remember I took some toilet paper rolls and some wires in my dad's garage and kind of built what was an approximation of what maybe George Kell and Al Kaline were wearing during Tigers broadcasts back in the 80s. But the first time I ever put on real ones was in 1993. I recently found the pay stub for it. I got paid for it. I was 15 and I was doing, me and Ryan Belfry did 2 games on Comcast. No, I'm sorry. This is well before Continental Cablevision, Channel 11 in Roseville, Michigan. And we did 2 football games. The first one, I'm trying to think. I know it was Roseville High School where we went to high school. And then another one was I think that was a homecoming game, and then the other one was I think Bishop Foley, I think in Royal Oak or near Madison Heights, Michigan. So 2 local high school football games on television. I think it was maybe a 3-camera deal back then. I'm hoping it was 3. It might have been 2, but I got $25 for each game, and that started off. I was 15 and I didn't know anything about football. I still don't. But it was a lot of fun to do that and really wet my whistle.
You got a significant head start ahead of me. I did not have my first TV job until I was 16. Doing.
I wouldn't call that a TV job. Yours, I'm sure, was a lot more involved than mine.
And to this day, I don't know why I got that job. Do you know why you got the job? Because I was someone who thought I was going to be an architect my whole life until all of a sudden junior, fall year, a friend asks, hey, the school district is doing high school football games. Do you want to be the sideline reporter? Yeah,
I mean, I wanted to be pretty much a baseball broadcaster since I was 8. The only other career profession I sought was a game show host when I was 4. I announced that that's what I was going to go into and created a slew of game show ideas that I was going to market. I'm sure I drove my parents nuts with that, but but when I was 8, I really got into baseball. Growing up in Detroit, the Tigers, when I was 6, won the World Series. So I started to understand that people were paying attention to the Tigers, and I grew to love baseball. A lot of my great-grandparents, I was very lucky to have them growing up, were into baseball. So they're the ones that really got me into baseball, great-grandfathers and grandmothers. So I think, baseball-wise, you can probably tell in my broadcasting style, I have kind of an old soul because I think about how they viewed the game being born around 1900, and that's kind of how, I like to view the game sort of through those lenses. So I've gotten off on a tangent already. It's the first of many, Lincoln. Let's go.
No. Well, I want to apologize for anybody who's tuning in and the fact that you said you want to be a game show host and I act like that was normal. That's only because that's come up in some other interviews you've done, that's been a part of your path. That is not necessarily the dream of all of us. We wouldn't mind the residuals that continue to appear when reruns air. But no, that's an entertaining note of your path along the way. And you kind of think of the irony of the old broadcasters. They also were not on site. They were recreating with a block of wood. So we've kind of come full circle, but for a completely different reason. When you wrap up your time in college at Michigan State, how did you think you were going to start to make a path into the industry?
I really yearned for working in Major League Baseball. Or at least professional baseball, minor league baseball. I never really cared for college ball that much, but I really liked minor league baseball or Major League Baseball. So a friend of mine, Jack Edwards, who does the Bruins games, I had met him by writing him letters when I was 13, when he was at ESPN, just wanting to, what do you do? How do people do this? And he took a special interest. I mean, he really helped me out through my teen years and my college years. And he goes, go out to the winter meetings. And so in 1999, after I graduated, about 6 months after, I went out to Anaheim and got a job in minor league baseball, working in Charleston, South Carolina. So I didn't really know how at all to do play-by-play or get into baseball, but Jack helped me do that and really set me off on the right road.
This is still before the internet had really caught on. You and I, when we were in college, there was no streaming of games. So you couldn't create your own opportunities that way. And there certainly weren't college networks where even a college soccer game might fall your way. But the winter meetings, I think if nothing else, that's the consistent trend of talking about networking and the importance of just getting to meet people. They're not going to offer you their job, but they may at least be aware of you down the road and be able to point you in the right direction when a peer is stepping away and a job does open up.
Yeah, and I don't know what it's like these days, but another great aspect of it was to meet other broadcasters. I mean, I didn't know anybody else that was doing this. What is this like? What is this world going to be like if I do get a job? I like to drink beer. It was a great chance to drink beer. So everyone likes to drink beer in baseball, it turns out. Who knew? So
I want to remind everybody, Joe's first major league full-time job was with a team called the Brewers. But all right.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Light beer for Miller. So, I think, I hope you don't have like Heineken sponsoring the podcast or something.
Not yet.
Ruined everything for you. But yeah, I think that's, for me, it just, I liked the vibe. I liked meeting everybody. I liked talking with people that were doing this already. And Neil Sullins was very, very helpful to me. Doug Greenwald. Those two guys really stand out to me as, they had already been working in doing games, and they went way out of their way to help me, and probably many others too, to like just to learn the ropes a little bit. Okay, this is how you sign up for job interviews, and this is what you should do, and this is what, traveling through the whatever league, Midwest League is like. Oh, okay, I have no idea. So I've really learned completely from scratch, and there have been so many people that have helped, kind of guide me.
I wish it was easier to explain to people how to get to where they want to be. If you want to be a doctor, you start in high school, you take the right classes, you take the tests, you go to college, you do the right classes, you take a test, and eventually, if you're good enough, you wind up being a doctor. In broadcasting, I always dream of the day I can just create a cookie cutter paragraph to reply to people that's helpful of how to get started, because I'm generally saying the right things, but everybody's story is already a little different before they even get started. I find myself just typing from scratch each and every time. I want to jump into something that one reason why I wanted to reach out to you was the fact, call of the game. As much as every broadcaster, I'm confident 90% of broadcasters will respond to younger broadcasters, whether it be let them observe if they can, or something else, because somebody did that for them. Well, callofthegame.com, you and Jim Tocco and some other regulars kind of fostered an environment for networking, answering common questions. It wasn't like some of the websites today that have more of a sales pressure tactic and some other things that people are looking to get out of it when they host a website. but you all actually wanted to help kind of grow opportunities and kind of create a network of folks. How did callofthegame.com come about with you and Jim?
I don't know if anybody else in America is talking about a website that hasn't existed in 13 years. I mean,
it was up for auction this summer,
moved.
and I regret not bidding on it.
Oh, it was for auction, was it? Really?
The domain was.
For auction?
Yeah.
What would be the price?
I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone's clamoring for espnnet.sportzone.com as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, I'm just so flattered, and I'm sure Toko is too, that people even remember what we were doing or could be affected by it, because, that was our aim. This is about 2000 when, Web 2.0 is taking place. Basically everybody's on the internet in some form. We didn't have smartphones yet, but people had computers at their desks with the internet, and now broadband is starting to be more common. You're not on dial-up anymore. So we figured and we were both starting out in our first couple of years in professional baseball. So we figured it'd be a way to not only connect us with the rest of professional baseball, but with everyone with each other. And, it was a message board. We would post job news. And those things are easily replicated these days. They're all out there. But I think the magic with that was it hadn't existed yet at that time. Or if it did, it was not as well followed or as complete. So we just kind of took that. It wasn't some bright idea. We were just the ones to have done it. And I think that was nice because we got to meet so many wonderful people that, many of whom were with whom we're still friends. Years later, we did get some opportunities out of it too. We would still post the opening if there was a job opening, but we might apply for it too. But we're going to share it with everybody else. Karma, of course. So, but it was really neat to do, and I think if you're a young broadcaster or a hopeful broadcaster listening, I think the moral of that story is, and I was talking with a broadcaster friend yesterday about a similar topic. You got to come up with something, not a gimmick, but you got to separate yourself. And I think, if you're going to put that in that one paragraph, to respond to hopeful broadcasters, you got to come up with something like Broadcaster 411, for instance, which you did, and here's a way for everybody to find who's working where. And I still utilize that from time to time. Little things like that can make a big difference and be a big deal because, there's just so many people that want to do this thing. And there are people that are fantastic and are great and are so talented that they're just going to get any job that they want. I'm not one of those people. So I had to figure out a way to get noticed, to kind of separate myself from a lot of very talented people who got hired later or not at all, but were just as talented, if not more talented than me. But I just happened to stand out. So that's kind of where that came from.
Part of you kind of talk about there are some talented people who just don't wind up where they should be, and that is because there is no obvious path of how you get from point A to point B. We all have to debate: do you need to stick with play-by-play? Do you need to take a host job in a major market? We'll get into some of that. Just because I know you're a hip hop fan growing up in Michigan, I like to think Call of the Game was your FUBU. It was for us, by us. It was for broadcasters, by broadcasters. You could sense that. And that's why it was such a great community. It was one day on those forums that somebody said, is there a way we could just list all of the minor league baseball broadcasters? And I don't remember if it was Phil Giboleo or Joe Pott or somebody saying, there's just so much turnover, you can't do that. And I thought, well, here I am out of law school. I have the typical amount of work during the summer that the average recent graduate has, which is nothing. I'll go spend $10 on a domain, and I will figure out who all these announcers are, and I'll put them up. And now it's been a little over a decade, and luckily Google Docs became a thing a few years ago, so I was no longer having to manually enter, but people could submit their own acceptance of positions with different places, and all I had to do was approve, confirm they're a real person, despite the Russian last names. But that broadcaster 411, my regret is, I think probably the way you felt with Call of the Game, eventually you can't put as much time into it as perhaps you would like and really foster that environment. So right now it's kind of a cold directory. And so it's still helpful. People can answer some basic questions, but you still kind of wish that you could still foster more of an environment that's good for networking. But it did have the selfish added benefit where people who shouldn't know who I was happened to recognize my name along the way just because they had stumbled across the website.
Yeah, I just think that's the way to go. If you can, try to differentiate yourself, and just in a general sense, I mean, just do something good for the community at hand. And by the way, who would ever thought that we'd be talking about FUBU during the podcast today? Lincoln, you are a real master, and I just wish that we could reference Master P. Percy Miller, or somebody of the like.
I am one square away from Joe Block bingo here, if you include the free square. And we'll get to Harry Doyle in a moment. So you mentioned how you might be able to get an advantage on some of those job postings. Obviously, an opportunity with the Montreal Expos during those 2 years that Major League Baseball owned them came about. You were in the Southeast, and so you were able to help out with some Atlanta games and some others as well. What was that experience like? And at what point did you think maybe I need to figure out, now that I've proven I can do play-by-play, some other way to get a foot in the door that takes you over to New Orleans and the NBA?
I have a debt of gratitude owed to Elliot Price, who was calling the Expos games in English radio at that time. And Mark Griffin got pulled off the road for saving money when baseball bought the Expos. So they were traveling one announcer on radio, and 9 innings in 162 games on radio is a lot when you're all by yourself. So Elliot came up with the idea and got it approved by the team. Hey, can we have some other minor league announcers sit in with me? And, what do you think? Yeah, we won't pay them anything, but sure, fine, And so the gig was, you get to do one of the 2 pregame interviews, and you get to do the middle 3, and you sit in the rest of the time. And Elliot's very conversational, and it's almost a talk show style with him. So it's not like 3 innings go by and you don't talk. I mean, we're conversing the whole time. So I think that my indoctrination to doing games wasn't proving anything to anybody else that, well, okay, this guy can do games now. More proving it to myself. This is actually doing it. Okay, here are the things that I kind of need to do better, improve upon, and tighten up to really know that I can do this and convince people that I can do this. So, and I did that for a couple of years, their last 2 years in Montreal. And it was great. Jacques Doucette was so wonderful to me, the French language voice of the Expos as well, he and Elliot. So it was, again, just a very welcoming place. I kept thinking, well, this is, people like beer. This is great. The baseball and talking and all of my favorite things. So, and even rap. Elliot, before my first game, loosened me up. He said, "What do you want to hear?" And so he had his what were they called? iPods, right?
Well, Drake
iPods.
was not an option back then, so
Not before
I'm not sure what you asked for. But this was before you got your Zune. You were still working with with an iPod.
Yeah, my Microsoft ties. So I think with that, he played some Biggie. I forget what song it was, but I asked for some Biggie, and he put it on his iPod and gave me an earbud. And so he's like, all right, you're loose, you're ready to go. So, I think it kind of threw him for a loop too. It was like, okay, yeah, I did have that song. Yeah. We'll give you one more chance. What song do you want to hear? I was like, oh, okay. All right, that's we see
so few. I feel like, you can correct me if you feel otherwise, but we see so few career minor league baseball broadcasters get rewarded despite their tenure. It seems like a lot of the major league jobs wind up going to a studio host, somebody else who's been in a major market. Now, with that said, they may very well have a significant resume that comes from minor league baseball, but it doesn't necessarily mean that was their most recent stop in AA or AAA. Did that influence at all your taking a studio host job in the NBA with the Hornets? I know you also took advantage of the Sun Belt being in that area and getting some TV games and some other sports as well.
I just clawed and found anything I could, and there's no real rhyme or reason. It wasn't as if I was curating a resume. It was I was coming back from Great Falls. I quit my job doing talk in Jacksonville. I was not going to do baseball that summer by no choice of my own, and so I wanted to do baseball, and I had gotten my salary cut in half by the radio station there because I hadn't made any sales. I also was, my slot was moved from 10 to 1 to 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. So that also made it a lot tougher to convince people to buy local Jacksonville sports talk at night, so, but no excuses. I didn't sell anything. So I got my salary cut in half, and I said, well, if I'm going to make this, I might as well go have fun. So I went out to Great Falls, Montana, and I called baseball games that summer, made enough to probably break even, and came back to Jacksonville, and I don't have any work. I've burned the bridge at the radio station. I am not invited to call the games at the ballpark anymore. Again, I didn't do anything wrong, just once in a while.
It was kind of a routine, a dance they were going through every few years.
They just fired people after a given time, every 3 years or whatever. So I was out of options, quite literally, and I said, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do. So right before I came back on Call of the Game, this is the final real weeks probably of Call of the Game, there was a posting for the Hornets pre and post job, and I applied for it, and immediately, really it took off. Everyone I spoke to, Lou Schumann was my boss, just a wizard during his career behind the scenes, managing broadcasters in the NBA at several stops. And Sean Kelly, who does games at ESPN now, he was the radio broadcaster there. Bob Licht was so good, their TV broadcaster, Jerry Valancourt, Gil McGregor as well. All those guys were fantastic. And we all liked each other, so I was a good fit, and I had the audio production capabilities that they needed because my job was basically to run the radio network, and then also just give scores at halftime.
We give it a more glamorous job title than maybe people realize, but yeah.
I mean, so much of my job was production, and it's still probably the most proud I am of anything I've done. Because I really think with the music and the halftime shows and all that stuff, it was so well produced. I felt so good. I still feel good about it today. I really think that my work stands up, and I don't talk that way about even by play-by-play or anything like that. But I did about that. I thought it was really good. But that job, I only took that path because that was my only option, and I was just glad to have that option. And it worked out for the best because I ended up meeting my wife in New Orleans. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And then I think that springboarded me to LA and to Milwaukee and now back here in our home of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you had a fun path to follow. I'm just going to mention the Sunbelt TV because this guy named Joe Davis seemed to keep just riding your coattails. After you left town, Davis came in, did that TV gig. Of course, he's now at the Dodgers where you were on a previous stop.
You have to point out, Lincoln, Joe is 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And so he's 10 years ahead. So if he's the guy following me, so he's 10 years ahead. And he was always 10 years ahead. He was always 20 years ahead of everybody else.
He first landed on my radar when I saw this former Division III athlete applying to what was likely a blind audition for the new Major League Baseball network at the time when they were asking different people to send in some tapes for an ambiguous role. And I was curious who else is applying. And then I come across this Joe Davis guy who had played some college ball for, again, a Division III school, I think. And, yeah. Obviously, we would all be fortunate to have a percentage of his talent and what his career has taken him to. He and Adam Amin, about the same time, were fantastic finds at the time by ESPN. Adam, of course, just recently took the Bulls job, moving over to Fox. But I want to. We'll get us up to modern day 2020, leading up to a global pandemic. So you get that hosting job with the Dodgers. You wind up getting the number 2 gig with the Brewers because the number 1 job is already taken by someone who's pretty talented. And
numbers 1, 2, and 3 were taken by Bob Uecker. I'm the 4 broadcaster there. You know,
yeah,
we're friends to this day. One of the most wonderful human beings you'll ever come across, and that was such a great experience. I just have to say it. I know you didn't ask a question, but you know, he really helped me become, in my view, a pro and a good entertainer, because he's, you know, I use my personality, but he always encouraged that, and it can be stifling working with him and his personality, because he's one of the funniest, wittiest people that have ever, you know, been behind a microphone ever. But he always encouraged that, and we had a lot of fun.
Uecker has been locked into his own booth. So apparently the ladder, Uecker's ladder, was there to get a repairman up there to open the door.
Folks here who do all sorts of things around Miller Park, taking the door off the hinges, coming up a ladder, into the booth, taking the door off the hinges. We have a means of escape. We have some new material for that rooftop sitcom.
So you go from the number 2 in Milwaukee, the number 1 job opens up in Pittsburgh, and there's a little bit of, I've never used the word kismet in any kind of on-air capacity, but the fact that your wife has the ties to the area, some of your distant family, and so here you are, the lead voice for the Pirates. What was the job definition at the time when you arrived in Pittsburgh?
Greg Brown and I do play-by-play, and the other guys are analysts. But other than that, there's no designation. We split up the games, and so when Tim Everett went home to Boston, he's from Nashua, New Hampshire. That opened this up, and my wife grew up in South Park. It's a southern suburb, so to speak, of Pittsburgh, and this was the one place we were going to go from Milwaukee if they would have us, because we could, you know, unite family, and it turns out that, you know, all 3 of my kids are born here. We got married here, and you know, I had already been spending so much, you know, that particular off season as well, but I'm spending so much of the off seasons here, and all-star breaks and things like that. So it already felt like home, and it was just nice to be able to, you know, buy a house, put down roots, and say, all right, okay, well, you know, this is our home forever now, and we don't have to look elsewhere. So it's such a blessing to be able to call Pittsburgh home.
You've done so since 2016. You reported to spring training this past spring, correct? And then that's when things started to unravel. What was the status when the first dominoes from the NBA started to trickle down to all the other sports?
Well, it started really with the Pirates in baseball, and credit the medical staff. They were, you know, I don't know if it's about 10 days or so before the NBA shut down, where they were putting up some safeguards in place that now are such parts of our lives: the plexiglass and the hand sanitizer, limiting access to players, and just interaction. You know, they banned autographs. They banned us from going down in the clubhouse. They were starting to really scale back and do a lot of things that we're very familiar with now ahead of time. But the night of Wednesday, March 11th, my wife and I are laying in bed, and we're watching probably The Office. You know, so I don't know. You know, and but then we're looking on our phones, and sure enough, it's like the NBA shut down. And we're like, wait a second. And so, you know, we turn on the news, and Rudy Gobert and touching the microphones, and you know, NHL follows. And I said to my wife, I said, tomorrow baseball is going to shut down. So I was on the next day on TV. We're playing the Blue Jays, and I called our producer and our big boss, the AT&T Sportsnet Pittsburgh big boss, was in town, and so we were all talking that morning. I said, this is going to be the last game. Some people agreed, some people didn't. He said, well, just don't say anything. Well, so I don't know that. I'm just saying, I'm telling you that they're going to cancel the season, and it's going to be today, and maybe before we hit the air. But it wasn't. We went on, and we were the last you know, television broadcast of a major sporting event to sign off on Thursday, March the 12th at 4:09 or 4:19 or something p.m. And there wasn't one on again until July, So it was a weird feeling that day. It was kind of that knot in my stomach, knowing that something bad's going to happen type thing. None of us knew the entirety of it, of course, but I knew that we weren't going to play for a while, and it wasn't going to just be 2 weeks like baseball said, but it was going to be a while. And so I came on with that tone, more of a reporting tone. I made sure that I had all the information on COVID-19 and knew the facts about it, because I knew we were going to be talking about it a lot, and we did. And we tried not to cast a pall on the game, but we also had to characterize that you're not going to watch baseball again for a long time, and certainly not in this way. So, I'm proud of the way that our production crew and the broadcast crew and everybody handled that day on March 12th.
It was that Wednesday I signed off of a college baseball game, saying, promoting the upcoming weekend series, and then within 24 hours we found out that was a promise that was going to go unfulfilled. It's promising that the Pirates were acting on some of the early information. It sounded like the NBA probably 2 weeks earlier could have shut things down, but with the Rudy Gobert situation, all of a sudden it kind of caught some people's attention. But I think it's easy to imagine if that doesn't happen that day in the NBA, sports and the rest of American business may have gone on another 2 or 3 weeks without necessarily actually trying to take some of it seriously as quickly as it did. But
yeah, Adam Silver deserves a ton of credit. Because even with the NCAA men's, and I think the women's tournaments too, we're going to go without fans, and now that's how we operate for the most part in sports. But we didn't have any information then, and we had no idea what the scope was going to be. So Adam Silver just said, "Well, we're going to just shut it down, and we're going to wait and see. And if the smoke clears, then we'll go at it again." And the smoke didn't clear for a long time. So you got to give him a lot of credit because, not just because I think he and I look alike, but I think that he really, set the tone for America's response to taking it very seriously because it needed to be, and the NBA kind of set the tone. You're right.
Yeah, I did not see you and Adam Silver at the lockdown protest demanding haircuts back in the month of April or May.
No, I'm good, cuz I got it all. I've been doing it every other day for whatever we got it. We're on 8.5 months. I just keep it rolling.
So eventually you all find out things are going to start back up. The difference is, unlike the NBA and Major League Soccer, it's not going to be a bubble. But at some point you're realizing you're not going to be traveling. How did Pirates Radio handle things? Did they also call it remotely, or were they traveling?
No one traveled in Major League Baseball, so no radio, no television. So the people at AT&T Sportsnet, our immediate bosses, Mark Garda and Brian Warecki, with the Pirates, putting together a plan so that we have a way to broadcast radio games from a remote location, which ended up being a conference room in AT&T Sportsnet's studios. Now, the TV broadcast ended up looking fantastic because they have $1 million set, and they put up a really nice setup. So if you couldn't be at the game, at least it looked really good. We had, floor to ceiling video wall that we could work with, and all sorts of doodads and stuff. So it was great. For what you can do. Now, obviously, we lost track of the team, didn't have the insight nearly that we would normally have, and we're just kind of grasping at straws for the most part and speaking in generalities because we had nothing else to really go off of. But at least we were safe, and others were safe too. But the radio setup was as good as it could be. We had 3 monitors, and one was of all the field, so we could see defensive alignments. So we could try to, runners breaking, he's trying to steal, or maybe he's getting a good secondary lead. Things like that you can kind of pick up on. And you could try to, at least. And then a program feed, and then kind of a scoreboard type feed, balls and strikes, and the bullpen cameras and things like that. So we could try to at least approximate what it would be like to be at a game. And because of different COVID restrictions, we at one point had one of our broadcasters working from home, and I'm in the conference room. He's at home, and the game is in Chicago, or wherever, St. Louis. So it was very surreal to work that way, having never done any remote broadcasts before. But certainly on the radio side, it was particularly challenging, especially when there were times where we didn't know if we could be on the air, or the TV broadcast went off the air. There was no way to relay the game to our audience other than just making something up. And that's what we did.
So there's so many different ways to do a remote broadcast. You mentioned one way right there where even the announcers are not in the same room. That's when you start worrying about whether somebody's taking a pregnant pause before they continue their thought and whether you can jump in or not. Did you at least have a visual on the other guy off air so you could point to each other? No?
No.
Good.
Just guessing. Just guessing, and it sounded like it. So, I have no criticisms whatsoever of how we handled it in 2020. I do predict that at least to begin 21, we'll be doing the same thing or similar things. The pros, the engineers that assembled it, and like I said, our bosses that designed these systems, it couldn't be any better, really, truly, for what we had to work with. Really, the only problems came up that were things that are completely unavoidable, like a truck, a TV truck being on fire, or a gunman in Kansas City having a gun pointed at the TV truck, and no one there is going to report for work. Those were the two times where it precluded our ways to relay the game. But those, I think, were out of the normalcy.
That wasn't your plan B for needing a bathroom break? You didn't dial up a friend in Kansas City?
We were already on plan Y, Lincoln, so we run out of options at that. Yeah.
Did you have any experience with remote broadcasting before this?
No, never had done it. So I don't think, you just train your eyes, and it's limited, especially for our analysts, because they have been at a ballpark for thousands of times, and they can sense what's taking place. And our analysts are particularly astute, I feel, and it limited them quite a bit. And then for us, to try to detail the action or to set them up, we're missing things. And even between the two of us, we're missing a lot. And then, of course, not talking very regularly with players or the manager, and and then, of course, having almost no interaction outside of stuff with reporters. You lose so much of the nuance of being able to have a feel of what's going on in the clubhouse, what's going on the field, explaining what's taking place. It was a lot easier to be critical of the players, whereas we strive to be very fair. So those were some significant challenges that I think are pretty much unavoidable when you have a worldwide pandemic. We're dealing with something that in our lifetimes is unprecedented. But I do think that we've learned a lot, that there is value to those things that I speak of that have been missing, and that no technology is ever going to replace a lot of that stuff.
So even when the world was normal, I'd say about half of my schedule for the past few years has been remote sports, mainly college level, a variety of professional leagues as well. A lot of it's for budget purposes. Soccer broadcasters have been doing this for even longer because of international games. You're not always going to travel your announcers there. So even the top level of soccer, what you described to them, they would envy, because often they are held hostage to exactly what the home team is putting out there with the final product minus the graphics. But you got something I'm envious of. Each time college baseball comes around, I ask, is there any way we can just get a webcam where it just shows me everything all at once? Because I'm guessing when I call a double play, because not every shot on the final product is showing you the umpire at the same time that the ball is crossed in the bag. And so you're just hoping that you can guess based on body language after seeing these athletes over the years, whether or not somebody really has turned to. are there one or two things you were able to pick up on just to look for and how to improve your remote call throughout the season?
Yeah, layout. I mean, that's all I did. If I didn't know, I didn't say it. And so, I think it might be two. Maybe I'll say it might be two. No, it's a base hit it right. No, I'm terrible at this. Breaking into my Brockmeyer. But I think that was the lesson, and it's always really a lesson at any time. Is really, if you don't know something, don't say it. So I think that's kind of what I did, was just watching along with everybody else and then commenting when appropriate. So I wasn't trying to win an award and be right on the play, even on the radio call. I couldn't half the time. I just had to say, because I couldn't tell the difference between a low line drive and a ground ball. I couldn't. I can't tell the difference on that all 9 monitor. It's tiny. So I would just say, hit towards short, or whatever, and caught on a line by Newman, 1 out, or something like that. Hit to short, 1 hop to Newman. He'll take, he'll go to second to get the force, and that ends the inning. So I would just, be vague. And it's not like us to do that. We want to be as descriptive as possible, but I very quickly learned that I don't know what's happening. So I'm going to say something, give you some word salad until I can figure it out. And, whenever there was anything going on out of the ordinary too, rules confusion or protests of some sort with, a call that an umpire made, I had no idea.
Yeah, you're in the dark.
So it was very difficult to really pick up on those things too. But if you just don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, when I'm paired with an analyst who has an experience being in a studio hundreds and hundreds of miles away, it's similar to what you just said. I said, just don't paint yourself in a corner. Don't guess whether a flag was thrown during the football game. Eventually we'll find out if a flag was thrown. Don't speculate whether we're on the 25 or the 35-yard line, because if we were at the game, we would know. Just kind of hold up for a moment and kind of answers may present themselves to you. How much communication was there? Have you formed a network among your peers around Major League Baseball just to share thoughts, and not just complaining about things, but just kind of advice and ways to improve each other's adjustments to the remote game?
Yeah, I certainly didn't complain. I don't mean to sound as if I was complaining, because I think
that was more about just the average person in our business.
I think everybody that like I said, the engineers and all the professionals surrounding the crews, and boy, they did a fantastic job, and they had to do things that they'd never done before. But we did compare notes. I think once things became cemented, which was, days before the season was to begin, we finally had some answers. So I think we all called around to kind of get a consensus of, hey, what are you guys doing? Are we, is this weird that we're doing it this way? Or, because no one knew how you should go about doing this. But everyone, I would say just about every broadcaster wants to get it right and do it as well as he or she can. So that was the crux of the conversations, was best practice, exchange of best practices. And then as the season went on, I got into a habit, and a lot of the other broadcasters seem to be doing the same thing, is calling the other team's broadcaster before a series, because normally just stroll over while we're eating, or just come into the other booth or whatever, see him down on the field. Hey, what do you think about this guy? What's this guy got? That kind of chatter. But we wouldn't have that. We're not seeing each other. So to do that, but also then to compare, how is it going? And what are you doing? What have you found is a good tool, or some of the questions you've asked me, like we would ask each other. So everyone's striving to get it as right as possible and do as well as possible. So we had a lot of those conversations right before the season, and then throughout periodically, just to try to keep tabs on what's really happening and admitting to ourselves, this is really happening.
As long as everybody's staying healthy, I'm glad you've had this experience, just that you'll be able to look back on. There will be little silver linings you take away from it, especially considering how boring your career path has been so far. I'm glad you have a little something you can tell your grandkids one day about. So again, when I think of you, I think of somebody who wants to help people learn how to network and create the best opportunity for themselves possible. The advice I give to people is try to come out of college with as little student debt as possible, because if you have crushing debt, I've seen a lot of really good broadcasters never get a chance because those first few years, even if you get a minor league job, are not gonna help you out unless mom and dad can float you for a while. Reach out to people. When it's not a pandemic, try to observe them. Get greedy afterwards and ask them to recommend another person you can watch. If you're really greedy, ask if you can come back and sit in the stand somewhere and record yourself with the crowd noise, and just continue to network. Apply for jobs. As soon as you're a B or a B plus, apply for things. You don't need to be an A minus, A plus. It's all subjective. just make sure you're good enough that when they do use you, they'll keep using you again. But I don't think the average producer, unless they're at the very top level, is necessarily confident that they know the difference between a broadcaster in that range. I know from sending out my demos that it's been years since anybody's actually looked at one, even though they used me. I think they're more comfortable looking at your resume and saying who else they can point the finger at has used along the way. But is there something I'm leaving out? Is there something that you are regularly telling people?
Well, I mean, that's all good stuff. But I mean, we could talk all day and night about it because there are so many different things. But the overall prevailing feeling is you have to be relentless. This is not a passive career pursuit, and there are so many different paths to success, but almost none of them are told with somebody who lucked into this this great job and they just happen to be good at it and they've always been doing this. No, most people, if not everyone, has worked very hard, has had to really unearth every single possibility. One of the things I would do, this is years ago, but I would call every single Division I men's and women's college basketball program and figure out who broadcasts their games, whether it was an SID or somebody else, and was there an opening? And so I would make 600 phone calls, during the summer. To try to figure out what I might be, and I'd get one or two successes out of it. And even then, do I get a job?
That's a very good return, by the way, for people listening. You just need one yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I was able to make an opportunity here or there because I asked everybody for a job, everybody. So I think that's the kind of way you have to be. There's a lot of sacrifice involved. It is a career that needs to keep getting built because you have to work simultaneously on being a better broadcaster, networking and self-marketing, all at once. And it's a lot. It's my 20s were consumed with that. I worked a lot. I enjoyed it. And I focused, when I wasn't working, I was focusing on what I can do next. And that's all I did for a decade, basically. So I think that's, and even then I was 30 and I wasn't making 30 grand yet. So I think that's, that's a lesson that, unless you're, really talented or get a really fortunate break or both, you're probably going to have to work very, very hard into your 30s before you really start making ends meet. And even then, there's no promise of a very good gig, but you certainly won't get it if you don't work hard.
There is a group of legendary broadcasters that right about now are retiring, and it seems like almost every single one of them got that job at 23. And I made the mistake of being in grad school at the time. Otherwise, clearly, I would have gotten the network job at 23. But yes, no, in general, the problem with our job is we hang on to our job. We love our job, and so it doesn't come open very often. And as a result, you do have to be able to put in that time, like you said. You're going to be in your 30s and still waiting for that breakthrough at times. But eventually, you get your foot in the right door, you knock on the right door, and that opportunity can come around.
Yeah, teachers retire in their 50s and 60s. We don't. Many of us work into our 80s even. So I think that's that there's a challenge there, of course, but instead of hating on, who's got the job, or, conspiring to figure out how you can get to a certain spot, just work on you, work on being better, getting to know people, just be genuinely concerned about people, and getting to know them and enjoying. You make a lot of friends, and some people, the whole crux of getting to know them is, hey, I would like for you to hire me one day. But then you just end up finding out that you like a lot of these people, and you just talk, and it ends up being more of just a conversation when a job comes open rather than an interview. And I think if you can build up to that, that's another little key that I think is important. That, and then the marketing aspect, you can use an agency. I never have. Not that there's anything wrong. I think for most people, an agency is probably the way to go. But for me, I have never done that because I thought that I could market myself the way I wanted to. And so, but that's another time-consuming bit that, if you have somebody else doing it for you, maybe that saves you some time and gets you some of that beer with your buddies that, you miss out on a little bit when you have to work like that.
That is a chicken and egg debate, though. However, a lot of the agents want you to already have the job that you're hoping to get by getting an agent, and so it's hit or miss. But everything you just wrapped up there with was perfect, and it's exactly why I wanted you to be the baseball guy I spoke to, because of your desire to reach out to other broadcasters over a decade ago. And it would be fun to map the broadcaster tree that you're not even familiar with completely, and all the branches. They certainly haven't all led to the same place, but they've led to a lot of people who have had really enjoyable careers. And there's a pretty good commonality on just how likable all of these guys have been whenever you've been able to catch up with them. So certainly appreciate your efforts, appreciate your generosity with the time, and appreciate the inspiration for the things that I now do in my career that kind of were inspired by you without you ever even knowing about it, Joe.
Wow. That is some high praise.
I'm going to edit that out until you have a job. Until you have a job to offer me, but we'll okay. But
that's
hey,
wonderful, Lincoln. I've enjoyed our conversation today. I hope everyone has gotten a little something out of it.